Welcome to the real life show, Living with a Chronic Illness. We are your hosts, Cassie and Chelsea. I'm Cassie, a single mom living with a chronic illness who is extremely passionate about living a full and happy life.
And I'm Chelsea, a mindset coach that has a passion for helping people learn to put themselves first and be the best version of themselves each and every day.
We came together to create Spoonies Unite, an uplifting community that offers resources, guidance, and support so you can live your best life while giving you the space to be yourself, be heard, and feel understood. We hope that by providing education from experts, we help Spoonies and their loved ones thrive.
This show is not only for those who live with a chronic illness, but their friends, family, spouses, and just anyone else existing on the earth. Our goal is to normalizing having a chronic illness by sharing the real stories with real people and show the world how relatable those everyday struggles can be. There's a little something in here for everyone.
And of course, thank you to our patrons for your continued support making this possible. If you love our show and want to get some extra goodies, go to patreon.com/TheRealSpooniesUnite. Enjoy the show. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the real life show, Living with a Chronic Illness. We are super excited about today's interview. Just as a heads up, some of the interview is a little bit brain fog full because I was on painkillers while we recorded this episode, and painkillers and me don't always agree. I was a little bit foggy minded, especially because yesterday was my first day having an Entyvio infusion. And so I have just not been myself. I've had a lot of pain the last couple of days. And that obviously is, it was contagious virally because then Chelsea.
Yeah, I have no excuse.
Yeah, it was more of just like it rippled through. And so Chelsea started with a really good brain and it dwindled throughout.
I'm going to blame it on the fact that it's been cloudy for almost a week here. And
blame it on the fog, the cloud fog.
Literally blaming my brain fog on the cloud fog because I just don't function as well without the sun.
Yeah.
My energy is a lot lower. And so I think that was impacting the brain.
I think that's fair.
So,
and what does that say about our Pacific Northwest people and the cloudiness?
Shout out to all of you. I hope you all are doing okay. I could not live there.
Yes.
But we had even though the two of us had at moments trouble thinking straight.
We had a wonderful chat.
It was great.
And so we want to give a special shout out to our interviewee, Effie, because her brain was tip top and I enjoyed her brain very much. Effie is a freelance health writer, content creator, patient leader, and rheumatoid arthritis advocate. She resides in Chicago, Illinois, where she is currently working on her debut children's book and other projects.
We really did have a wonderful time talking to Effie. She has some amazing ways of explaining chronic illness, invisible disability, chronic conditions, whatever label you want to put on it, her own experience. And she has this amazing video series, which we will talk a lot about in the interview, which are linked in the show notes. So this is your first opportunity to pause the podcast, go to the show notes, listen and watch the videos.
Yeah, they're like, I think it's only like 9 or 11 minutes altogether for the 3-part videos.
Yes,
and it is well worth watching.
Yep.
So
unless you're driving, please do not do
exactly.
that if you're driving. Wait till you're
Disclaimer.
Not driving. Okay.
Yeah. It could even be worth you pulling over to watch and then resume your commute.
As long as it's safe.
I mean, be responsible, people. Come on now.
Yeah. All right. Well, here is the interview with Effie. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the real life show, Living with a Chronic Illness. We're recording this during Invisible Disabilities Week. This episode is not coming out during Invisible Disabilities Week, so this was in the past. But we are so excited to have Effie Kouliopoulos with us today because she does so much amazing work when it comes to invisible disabilities. So hi, Effie.
Hi, how are you guys?
Good.
We're getting through the day.
Yeah.
I'm glad that we're celebrating Invisible Disabilities Week with the 3 of us recording this episode right now.
Yes.
Yeah, it is great. Thank you guys for having me on.
Thanks for coming on.
Coming on. So, Effie, will you tell our listeners a little bit about you and your story and what's gotten you to where you are today?
So basically like where I have gotten to today, it happened more organically. It wasn't like I planned, to be on the real Spoonies Unite podcast or like make my blog, like if you were to tell me that 5 years ago, but like, yeah, right.
Yeah.
But I was diagnosed with polyarticular juvenile idiopathic arthritis. I know it's a mouthful. But I was experiencing symptoms when I was 15, 16, and then I got diagnosed 18. So there was like, a big gap, I would say like 3 to 4 years where I was told nothing's wrong. And then, obviously something was. And then so I started on treatment like 3 to 4 years after the fact, which wasn't the best because they say for my condition, it's, optimal to be on medication within the first 2 years. So you don't develop any complications or irreversible joint damage, which I have. And so that was kind of, a roadblock that I hit, in the beginning years. And then, I dabbled in advocacy for a little bit, like in my college years, but then I kind of went on, my own way for a little bit, not really knowing what I want to do. But then after I had a total knee replacement in 2016, it just, I don't know, I kind of say that this moment was like the catalyst for me to create all these things that I have been working on now. I don't think if I did go through that, then I would have had, the courage to take the leap of faith to create my blog, Rising Above Rheumatoid Arthritis, and just get involved more in advocacy because I feel as I struggled more, I wanted to share my story more. And so that's kind of where, led me to where I am now.
So, what's like your day-to-day experience? Like, do you have a lot of pain, joint stiffness?
So now my disease activity, all these words are so big to say sometimes. I'm like, okay. But it's more like low now, they say, but I still do have like residual like inflammation and pain here and there, but mostly in like the joints that have been impacted. But the medication I'm on now luckily is working. However, I may be changing my plan. I don't know. We're waiting on some tests. So that's kind of like the limbo phase I'm in now. But I have been in an extreme pain before. I mean, I've had very bad flares. Like in 2012, I had one that left me bedridden for a week. It took me 6 months to recover from because like the loss of muscle mass and all that stuff. But, that was also something that led me to not be able to work full time. And, I wrote an article about this recently for Creaky Joints that's coming out this week, I believe. But I was explaining in the article how like even working a 9 to 5 job was hard. I would have to wake up a little bit earlier to like get functioning and moving. And then I would have to take sometimes pain medication because at that time I was on 800 milligrams ibuprofen. And, it wasn't like an easy thing to work like an 8 to 5 or 9 to 5 either. And like, even when I drove to work, I would have to sit there for like a couple minutes, like catch my breath and like regroup. And then even after work, I would go in my car and then just kind of chill, check my emails before I would drive home, So it was like a bit hard in those beginning years because I was still dealing with the fatigue, which I don't deal as much with now. But, like there's just like all these little roadblocks that kind of set me on the course I am now. And like I am on disability. I only work part-time now, but in the future, I hope to go back to work full-time.
Yeah. I really love in the beginning how you said your disease activity is at a low right now. That's the first time I've heard someone refer to either being in a flare or like having their disease under control as your disease activity. I sort of like just, I don't know, it takes a little bit of that negative, I don't know, like, I liked that.
That's how the doctors refer to it as.
Really?
Yeah. Like when I asked my doctor how I'm doing, she's like, well, it's like, because with rheumatoid arthritis, we have different tests that can test that to see like how you're doing compared to like before, but I don't know if you guys are aware of like rheumatoid arthritis, but there's like, the cytokine and inflammatory markers that are present. And sometimes those can be high along with your SED rate and your CRP that match that up. But yeah.
Right.
Well, I also like that disease activity kind of puts the emphasis on the disease, not you. It's not that there's something wrong with you as a person, as an individual. It's that there's just something that you are dealing with that happens to have high activity right now.
Yeah. Like, because sometimes with the word flare, like I'm in a flare right now and stuff, I don't know. Sometimes that wording doesn't resonate with me. And there does seem to be the feeling of always like, what have I done to contribute to this? Or how have I triggered this
Right.
flare, et cetera. But when it's like, my disease activity is really high right now, I feel a little bit, I don't know. As soon as you said that, I was like, yes, today my disease activity is really high. For the
I
last
know.
few weeks, months, this is like, and it actually, I felt almost like a little weight had been lifted off my shoulders of like, kind of like Chelsea said, like, I haven't done this. So first of all, that's cool. Secondly, yeah, it is interesting when you were doing all of your work and everything, and then, like you said, now you're realizing that that's just not right for you for life. And looking at working part-time, and that's part of probably what inspired you to be going for this blog
Yeah.
and yeah, getting
Because I had
everything.
a downtime too, but I think like it also like was, like I said, the catalyst, because it was like inspired me to like be open about my story a little bit more, because prior to 2012 or 2016, I would say, like, I was more private. I didn't really share
Mhm.
my struggles. Like, I like to say, like, there's two groups of like the silent observers, like either people who don't really want to share their story, but they're just kind of tuning in to social media from afar, privately. And then there's other people who want to, but they're scared, or they don't really want to have everyone know about their business, which I was,
Mhm.
kind of in both categories at one point. But, even with like the 9 to 5 normal stuff, like I just don't really ever think that was for me to begin with. I didn't really like it anyways. I mean, the place I was working for was nice, but I just, if I do go back full time, I don't know if I'm going to want that type of life again. It depends
Yeah.
what is out there. But like what you were saying with, even with the word flare, like I know for me, I've gotten so hard on myself, like, oh my God, what did I eat? Or that maybe caused my flare, or like, did I overwork myself? You kind of like get too hard on yourself in
Mhm.
regards to like what causes your flares. And then you're not looking at the big picture.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
So, Effie, you have made an amazing video series, and it is called I Am Invisible No More,
Yeah.
correct? Yes,
Yeah.
there's three parts to it.
Mhm.
They will be linked in our bio. And I really encourage everyone to go watch them. They're short. That was the thing that I loved about your videos, is you did an amazing job of putting just so much information that hit really, really hard in a very effective way. And
Yes.
I like that because I felt like it helped me, as someone that doesn't have an illness, doesn't have a disability. It really helped me put myself in the shoes of people that do have that life situation. And then I also liked it because it's like, well, if there's someone out there that's like, well, why do you have disability? Why do you have a handicap parking tag? You're not sick. You look completely fine. You're too young
Yeah.
to be sick. All those things. It felt really easy to be able to send that to them and be like, can you just watch this real fast and get
Yeah.
a piece of that? So what was the inspiration behind creating that video series?
Yeah. So when I was in college, like I would say now it's over a decade, like 12 years ago now, I was attending like university in my city in the Midwest where I live, and I was a commuter student. So I didn't live on campus ever, because whatever, I just didn't choose to do so. But here in the Midwest where I live, we have like different forms of transportation. Like you can obviously drive your car, you can take the metro train, or something we have called the L, which is like another
Where
train
in the
that goes
Midwest are you?
Chicago.
Okay, because we're in Kansas.
Oh, okay, okay.
And I think you might be our first like Midwest sister.
Yeah, fellow
Oh,
Midwest
really?
person.
Yeah.
Cool. Nice. So yeah, so there's like another little train that goes in other parts of the city where the other one doesn't go to. But regardless, I ended up taking the metro train because whatever. It was like winter and it was really cold. And then so I had to be at class at like 8 a.m. And I remember that day, like the teacher was like, you guys have to bring your textbooks for points. It was like one of those like not, I wouldn't say like it was like important classes, but it was like an elective course. It wasn't anything like important. But we had to bring our books. It was like the first week or so of winter semester that I was attending. And I had like a huge backpack, and then the train like was coming like within like 5-10 minutes, and like I just rolled out last minute. But obviously I had to take my time in the morning too, because
Mm-hmm.
if I didn't, then it wouldn't be good. But yeah, I just parked my car in front of like the platform where you can wait for the train to come. And so then I like ran up these 3 little steps and then I just hopped onto the train. So whoever saw me do that probably was like, oh, that girl is like misusing her accessible disabled parking plaque or whatever you like to call it nowadays. And they had called the cops on me. So in the film series that I made, it wasn't necessarily my, story in regards to like someone approaching me, because no one approached me. I don't think they even had time because I
Right.
went on the train. But I don't know if they were going to anyway. It's just because like the place that it was, like the suburb that I was living in, it wasn't like a place that people would approach you. It was very odd for that to happen. So I think they just had called and reported it. And then someone had showed up to my house later that evening, was a cop, police officer. And then he was just like, oh, like, I was just checking in to see if like this was like, the owner of this parking placard. And then I'm like, yeah, it is me, whatever. And he was like a younger guy, so he was cool about it. And he just went off his, in his merry way, but that's kind of
Wow.
what happened that day. And I was a little distraught like at first. And then I was like, oh, whatever, but I think it like was, again, like one of the first experiences I ever had, because I didn't know, even prior to getting diagnosed, I didn't really know what a Spoonie was, or like all this other stuff that's in the chronic illness community now. I was more naive to it, I have to say.
Mhm.
And so that was kind of a shocker to me, because I didn't know people do that,
Yeah. Well, and in that video, hopefully all of you have like paused our show and gone and watched the YouTube video at this point. But
That would
if
have
you
been a good
haven't, yeah, if you haven't, there's a moment on there in the video of someone pulling up in the car, getting out, and an older
Mhm.
lady comes up to her and is like, "You're not disabled," and kind of showing this scenario
Yeah.
in an upfront, confrontational kind of way. And the next clip kind of cut to people walking around holding a piece of paper saying, I am living with multiple sclerosis. I
Right.
am living with rheumatoid arthritis. That
Yeah.
was really impactful to me, because I'm like, just imagine if we did all walk around with those signs,
Yeah.
because like that is true. Like people, if you walk around with crutches because you have a broken ankle, people are like, ooh, let me help you, watch out of the way or whatever.
Right.
Actually, that being said, that's not always true, because my son is 12. He's on TikTok and he sends me
wow.
these TikTok videos all the time. I can't even, whatever.
No, it's okay. I'm on TikTok too.
Okay, yeah. But he sends me all these TikToks, and lately he's been sending me a string of them. They're kind of like those social experiments where there's like a guy kind of like pretending to be blind, and he'll
wow.
fall over in certain situations, like on the subway or on the beach or, just in the grocery store, to see how many people help him.
Yeah.
And he has, I don't know if there's a correct word for the stick that blind people used to use in front of them. I'm sure there's actually a name for it. And I feel sorry to anyone who's listening that I don't know the name of this stick. But, that's a visible cue of someone having, a invisible disability essentially. And even still with those social experiments, people would like not help him. They would walk over him, or they would like grab their partner who was trying to like help pick him up because, it's a stranger. And so I know I went off on a little bit of a tangent there, but when I watched your video of people walking around with signs holding that to show what your disability is, and I definitely thought like that would make all the difference. But then maybe it still doesn't, I guess, for those who do.
And I always like to say, like, not everyone's going to understand, and people have to accept that. You can advocate however much you want or whatever, but not everyone is going to really understand the path you're walking on. And like what you just said about the TikTok videos, originally I wanted to do something like that, where we were going to see like the bystander effect, and see if anyone steps in to help. But it was
The bystander effect.
Yeah.
Yes.
It was too complicated to do that in like a real suburban, like metro train, like setting. So they were like, we scratched the idea off, and this is what I ended up coming up with. But it would be interesting to see that. But I think it's easier to do it on like a TikTok,
Yeah.
setting than it is like filming people like at the train station. So.
I know that's true. Cause a lot of those, like bystander effect, social experiment, those really get me. My son too, like when you have the child at a bus stop without a coat on, things like that. And do people offer the coat? Like all that stuff really, I mean, I'm I do think this is one of the beauties of social media, and the way that it is now is that it is making people see stuff in a different way, and it is
Mhm.
thanks to stuff like TikTok. So I think that if you did it on there, I'm sure it would have a huge effect. But even the videos that you created on YouTube, they are, like Chelsea said, like they are perfect. I mean, you really do. It's emotional, and yet it's very like factual. And there's definitely someone in my life who doesn't really believe, I don't know, my illness. You know, it's that invisible disability, invisible illness thing. And I actually almost considered sending him this video because it is so like, I don't know, factual and scientific and logical in a sense. And that's the only way that he usually responds to things. He's not super emotional. So I was like, this is great. He's going to get this.
Yeah, and then like, obviously what inspired me or motivated me, I like to say, to create this is because I started connecting with so many people in the community when I made my blog and all their social media accounts. And I saw people are going through this same exact experience like a decade later. And I was like, well, that's kind of weird. Because some people got it, like, I don't like to say got it worse, but I don't know how else to explain it. But some people, were approached, like if a mother, I read a story of her approached by someone when she had her child next to her, but her child had the disability, so she was able to use the accessible parking spot. And then she was accused of being a liar. And some people have had nasty notes on their cars. And, I don't really know who has a pen and paper on handy to do that, but, all the time. But, there's been a lot of people who've had like really bad harassment and bullying towards, their invisible disability. And then, not really understanding that. So that's why I wanted to make this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's an easy way to share to people who don't get it what it could be like to live with these different invisible illnesses, invisible disabilities. I know growing up, my grandmother was in a wheelchair for a while, and so she had a handicap parking pass. And so hers was, if she was in a wheelchair, it was very visually obvious, like that's why she has the parking space. That's why she gets to do that. And so I think that they're growing up, because I was very little. I think I was like 7 when she got into her wheelchair. So most of my childhood, she was in a wheelchair. And so there would be sometimes my attention would kind of be more on the handicap parking spots. And I think that there was a few times growing up that I would see someone who wasn't in a wheelchair, wasn't on crutches, who didn't have the obvious disability. I think that I did have some thoughts of, well, why are they using that? Like, if it was a busy parking lot and my grandma needed to use the space, she wouldn't be able to. And so I think it's also having conversations with just more people about the disability doesn't have to be visual.
Yeah.
And that's why this week that we're in right now is so important, because the more awareness we can bring, which is the big goal of this podcast, is to be able to share stories like yours, like Cassie's, like so many people going through this stuff every single day, so that more people can understand that it's not the, oh, they're in a wheelchair, oh, they're on crutches, they're disabled. It's so much broader than that.
Yeah.
So I love that you took the time to put that video together, because it's an amazing series. It's so perfect. I love it.
And I tried to show like different perspectives as well. Like,
Mhm.
obviously people living with either invisible disability or visible one, they all experience like good and bad days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's what I was trying to show too. Like, I know the ending might be like a more like happy like thought, but it might not necessarily occur, but it's just something to ponder. But, like there might be someone who is using an accessible aid, and then they're feeling good one minute and then they just drop it and they don't need it the next. And then that's why people,
Yes.
assume
Mhm.
that they're faking it. I've also had the same thoughts as you, where like before I was even needing this stuff, my placard or whatever else, like I was always sometimes thinking, oh, why is that person parking there? But I didn't like approach them or do anything, but you have those thoughts.
Yeah. Another thing too, that I liked about your video, because we don't always know what someone's experience is with their illness. And I had a Pilates client who had rheumatoid arthritis, and she always preferred to book her sessions like late afternoon, even evening, because she said that mornings were like her worst time waking up, the joint pain, mobility, et cetera. And she progressively got better throughout the day. which is complete opposite to me having Crohn's, that like by the end of the day, I mean, I texted Chelsea last week and was like, I need to no longer work evenings, period. And so I found that interesting, especially when you were putting on your sweater and your jacket and, kind of showing the difficulty of putting your arm even through the sleeve to get it on. That hasn't ever been a thought for me. And so will you share a little bit of what your experience is like living with your illness?
Yeah, I've experienced like really bad morning stiffness and fatigue, like I had said when I was working at one point, like full
Mhm.
time. Now like as my disease is kind of like controlled, I would say a little
Mhm.
bit, I don't experience bad morning stiffness or fatigue. I know that when I start to experience those things again, then I know I'm coming into a flare.
Yeah. Okay.
So those are little things for me. But yeah, I mean, it sometimes takes me some time still to even like regroup in the morning, like do my morning routine. And then kind of like mid morning, afternoon, I'm like more active,
Mhm.
to like do things. But now, like I would say, like the Hurricane 5 is past. That's what was like a doctor said, like the storm is kind of past. You're dealing with like damage now. That's kind of what stops me in the morning a little bit because I have to like warm up and stretch and do all those things. But I can still like probably wake up at 9 a.m. now and go for a walk, whereas before I wouldn't be able to do it as easily. I will tell friends like, hey, by 10:30, 11, I'll be free.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Hey everyone, I know you're all cozy listening to our episode, but I wanted to take a moment to let you know how you can become even more cozy with some Spoonie merch. All right, so we got a merch store. Hopefully you've looked at it. If you haven't, that's okay. That's why I'm telling you about it now. We got some cool stuff on there. There's sweatshirts, there's long sleeve shirts, there's t-shirts, there's tank tops, there's stuff that just says the real life show living with a chronic illness, so you can rep our podcast. But there's also stuff on there to just celebrate the Spoonie life you are living. We've got comfy stuff with, this is my all out of spoons outfit. So when you're not feeling your best, you can get all comfy cozy with a shirt that tells the world that you ain't feeling great and leave you alone, if that's your thing. We've also got stuff to help inspire you. I have a long sleeve shirt from our merch store that says dream, be happy, seek fulfillment, live your best life. And every time I put on that long sleeve shirt, I just feel so inspired and ready to take on the world. And it just reminds me that there's great stuff happening. So if you are interested in getting some Spoonie merch of your own, you can either head over to our website, therealspooniesunite.com, or the easiest thing is honestly just to swipe up or swipe down or whatever direction you need to get to the show notes, because the link will be there. Now back to the show.
Okay. Another thing I liked was, I think it was in part 3 of the video series. I really loved the question of what do you want others to know about what it's like living with an invisible disability. I mean, I was just like completely engaged. I wanted to know everybody's experiences and the variety of people that you got to answer the question, the different things that they've all dealt with, in the caption sharing their illness or their disability or injury. That was really amazing. And so how did you connect with everybody?
Yeah, so a lot of those people I met through Legal Health, like they just like a community with like, advocates and activists. Some people I met like outside of that too, but it was just more easier to kind of like get people involved via that route because I know some people don't really want to share openly on camera,
Mhm.
or record themselves doing that. So I did approach people who I know would, want to do it, but it was more of like an open, call. And then people just emailed me and it's like, yeah, I'm interested.
Yeah.
And then that's it. And then that's how many people I got and I put it together.
I really liked that. Got it. Chelsea, my brain, dude, right now, I'm so sorry. I have so many questions and my brain is just not tip top and I'm sweating like every pore in my body right now. It's like sweating.
Well, we've covered a lot. So
I know. Well, you're so efficient with the way that you talk,
Oh,
that
really?
I'm like,
Okay.
oh my God, I am one of those ones that uses a lot of words to say something. And
I think I am too, but maybe more in writing. I don't know.
right. And so why are you laughing so much about that? Because it's so true.
Because it's true.
I know. I know. I've definitely like been told that. My ex-husband would often not even read my text messages because they were just too long, apparently.
Like novels.
Oh.
Yes,
You
like
don't send
novels.
that
I
long
make
text
novels too.
messages.
It's okay.
Yeah. And I would always just be like, but I can't eliminate these words. And so whenever I'm editing like an Instagram post or even an Instagram story or like a blog, I'm like, okay, can I eliminate any of these words? And because I am long-winded. But my poor little brain from the last couple of days, I started a new drug yesterday,
Oh, okay.
called Entyvio. It's an immune suppressant. And I'm sure that, with, like you said, having changed medications, how
Yeah.
it just makes you foggy, And so since yesterday, I've just been a little foggy. So my little brain is like, oh, this question. And then it's not coming out. It's not
Well,
like
write them
processing.
down or whatever you need to do, and we can always come back. I have
Okay.
a question for Effie.
Perfect. Ask your question, Chelsea. Good God, because I feel like an idiot right now.
You're not an idiot.
No, you're amazing for coming
You're
on
doing
and
great.
doing a podcast after you start doing medication. I would be like,
Thank you.
I need off for like a
I
week.
know, right?
I did have a thought yesterday. I was like, oh, maybe we should have planned better for this.
But you want to know what?
We're the real life show.
Okay, first of all, we're the real life show, but also because I never want our guests to feel like I'm not showing up fully or anything. I experience so much joy and like fulfillment from our podcast interviews and getting to talk to other people and interact, that when you are kind of like going through the process of a new medication or whatever, and when you just, life is just hard, and looking at like the longevity of life is just hard, these little things like this hour freaking like rejuvenates me, like this hour makes me feel like I said, like fulfilled and happy and joy. And so this morning, as I've been laying in bed most of the day, very like, woe is me, tears in the eyes, like, poor me, my life. Oh my God. Now I'm like, the world is great and life is great and Effie is great and Chelsea's great. And all of our listeners are great. So selfishly, I didn't want to reschedule because I love this so much. And I watched your videos and I wanted to talk to you. So I apologize that my brain is not a little bit more tip top.
No worries.
But Chelsea has a wonderful question lined up.
So Effie, you're really good about advocating and sharing people's stories. What is something that you wished that people that don't have invisible disabilities, invisible illnesses, what is something that you wish like you could carry that sign around that they would just know about your experience or about just dealing with other people and being kind to other people? Is there like a statement that you would say to those people that are just not as nice?
That's such a good question, Chelsea.
I'm kind of struggling to phrase it in a coherent way, but hopefully that makes sense.
No, you can't not be coherent right now, okay? You have to be with it.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if I have necessarily a phrase, but I think that knowing that my condition impacts more than just the joints, but it impacts someone more than just the physical, like the emotional and the mental aspect, I think plays a big role. And I don't know if people know that,
Mm-hmm.
So when you do approach someone and you start accusing them or like being just like a bully, you have to understand that people are going through things that you may not be going through. You don't understand. And that goes with everyone too. Like you can, be walking down the street and someone just lost their job or got a divorce or broke up with their girlfriend. And it's like you approaching them and saying like, oh, do you have a broken heart? Because you don't look like it. It's like same thing with invisible illness or invisible disability. It's like, questioning people like what does a broken heart or a loss of a job look like anyways? You don't see those things. So I think like the mental and emotional aspect of disease in general and how that impacts someone is important for people to know.
Gosh,
that was a beautiful answer.
I know.
Like the comparison of like, well, if you lose your job or you've just got broken up with, or you have some other turmoil going on in your life, you don't wear that on the outside of you. Like that just doesn't, I mean, in dramatic versions of movies, people do.
Right.
They got the mascara going down their faces. But like that's not real life. And so I think the fact that you made that comparison of there's so much that everyone goes through that doesn't show up on their outward appearance, that no one would know, that just leading with kindness and just being a nice person to people is so important. And I also like that you brought up the kind of emotional and mental toll of illness, because that's a big thing too. I think when people who don't have chronic conditions or don't have a lot of experience with seeing what that can do to a person, they kind of think, well, oh, you're sick, like that's a physical thing, and it's not that simple.
Yeah, I mean, because you're always grieving, you know, like even if like some like you overcome things, like they say, but you know, I don't know if you necessarily overcome, you just kind of cope with it. Like same with like a loss of a parent or a friend or a family member, the scar of that kind of lessens over time, but it doesn't necessarily go away. And I don't think it necessarily a diagnosis or surgery scars or whatever else goes away either. You just learn how to deal with it and move on with life.
Gosh, your perspective and like the scenarios you're giving are so freaking good.
Oh, thanks.
Because like, even, I mean, and even some of like the little, just even your word choicing, I literally texted, I was supposed to teach a virtual Pilates class tonight. And I texted all the instructors and I was like, can someone sub for me? I'm just in so much pain. I can't tonight. I had this medical thing yesterday, et cetera. And someone was like, I can, you know, and I wrote back and I was like, I'd love to sub for you in exchange for this favor. Thank you so much. And I literally put in there, I was like, some days, you know, it's just really hard to overcome like what I'm battling every day.
Yeah.
And so I literally used that word of overcome. And it even felt weird when I was typing it, because it's like, yeah, we're not overcoming it, because it's just some days it's easier to live with, you know, sometimes you can just kind of like tolerate it and keep going. And I really love that you shared that perspective about, like Chelsea said, like wearing a sign of I lost my job, or I'm grieving, I've lost somebody, or the heartbreak. Because I've always, and I wrote about this in our post today for Invisible Disabilities Week, I've always been one to think of that first. Like if we had a waitress or a waiter and let's just say it was not stellar service, having been in the waitress, you know, life many a time, I wouldn't always be like, oh my God, this is such bad service. They're such a bad waitress, blah, blah, blah. You know, they can't do their job. It's so simple, et cetera. I would think more of like, I wonder what they've got going on. And they must be having like a bad day. And I do think that my mom kind of like helped me think of things that way when I was little. And some of us maybe as adults are just like one of the guys you interviewed on there, asking about the statistic of numbers of people who have an invisible disability. And like, if you would have known that, and the guy was like, you know, asked me 20 years ago and I probably would have been judgmental, but now I've grown and I'm more sensitive and realize, and I believe it. I loved that too.
Me too.
You just chose really great stuff to feature. Because I was like, yeah, we do kind of get older, and sometimes you do have to develop your brain and your mindset and your perspective to be more accepting of others, or more understanding, or maybe you experience a loved one going through it, so you actually see it. And I think with social media nowadays, we are able to reach that younger generation with these impactful videos like yours, rather than them only getting to see it like in an in-person situation.
Yeah, and
Does that
I
make
only
sense?
it makes sense. And I only got like lucky with like interviewing like only older adults. When we stopped people on the street, there were like all the young people didn't want to answer. I'm like, that's fine. But you know, like I'm sure there's been moments when we all haven't been kind, and you know, we've done and said things that we haven't been proud of. You know, no one's perfect. You know, but there's sometimes there are things that need to be brought to light, and like how to handle certain situations, and also like I was trying to show like in one of the part one where like people can be using like accessible aids or be disabled because of an accident. It doesn't always have to come from an illness. Like you were just saying, like people have a lot of other things going on, like a car accident, for instance. That's why he's using his cane. And then, you know, I know one person, one woman, I forgot her name now, that I, you know, had submit a video for part 3. She was saying that other people are going through other things too. So it makes her, you know, understand kind of like where they're coming from, you know.
Yeah. That is a really important thing to share. Chelsea and I, like, especially when we started this a year ago, we definitely had more of like the chronic illness or invisible illness.
Yeah.
Mostly because of that having been my experience. But lately I've been really noticing, like, we've been starting to change some of our terminology and seeing a lot more of that around of invisible disability, because it's not just illness, because like you said, it could be an accident that completely changes your life and your daily life. And it may not be an illness, that has changed that course of your life. But it's valid all the same. And so I've definitely noticed like some of that, I don't know, I've been wanting to change some of that, the way that we're using that terminology.
Mm-hmm. I feel like sometimes they can be intertwined too, because like people with invisible illness, they can also have a disability too, but sometimes they don't, and they're separate. So sometimes the terms can get tricky with everything. I think health condition wise, but
and I think that they're kind of not exactly interchangeable, but I think that some people, they pick one that they identify with more. Right. Like as we've been able to meet more people in the community and talk to them and hear their stories more, there's some people that are like, yes, I have a chronic illness and it's this. And then some people are like, I have an invisible disability and it's this. And they could be two people that have the same thing, but they just kind of identify themselves in a different way, which is fine because you get to identify yourself how you want to. And I just found that interesting of kind of looking at kind of the broadening of what is the people that we're trying to help, what is the people that we want to better their lives. And I know our very first podcast episode is what is a chronic illness? And even then we had kind of had a hard time like having a very specific definition because to both of us, chronic pain was a kind of a chronic illness, even if you didn't have like an illness that was causing that chronic pain, if it came from a car accident or something else, or like we added in
and mental health stuff,
anxiety, depression, or any of the other things out there that could just kind of affect your daily life. Pretty much we were kind of like, if something is impacting your daily life in a negative way, you can put it underneath the umbrella of coming hanging out with us.
Yeah, we really wanted to be like inclusive. And it's really interesting with you saying that right now, Chelsea, because it's made me realize that like, so I was in a really bad car accident when I was 16 and I ended up missing like 3 months of school. I had a lot of issues from it. Migraines was one of them. I had really bad short-term memory loss and then chronic migraines. And I've had those since I was 16. I'm 32 now. And funnily enough, I've never looked at my migraines as like essentially a chronic illness. I've always been like, well, those are because of my car accident. And like completely like separating that as kind of like some kind of injury from this accident or whatever. And now with you just saying that, if anyone else came to me and was like, I have chronic migraines from a car accident, I'd be like, yeah, dude, like you have a chronic illness. That's really difficult. You're dealing with it all the time.
You are a member of the Spoonie Club.
Yeah.
Well, so it's a fun crew.
Yeah. Maybe we need to do an episode, Chelsea, about that. Like what is an invisible disability?
Yeah. I mean, probably
should.
I mean, I know quite a few people who struggle with chronic migraines, and I don't know if they would consider themselves to be chronically ill. And I'm using air quotes for those of you listening to the podcast and can't see me right now.
We forget that we can't be seen sometimes.
I know. But I mean, the migraines, they impact their life to a point where sometimes they can't work, or they can't do things that they really want to, or they're having to plan events around how they're feeling, or living in the fear of, well, I really want to go do this thing, but I'm starting to have a migraine. Is it going to last so that I won't be able to go do the thing I want to do? And to me, I'm like, yeah, that's part of the Spoonie community. That's part of having a chronic illness, an invisible disability,
chronic condition,
however you want to, however you want to label it.
And I like the chronic condition. That seems like it's like a little bit more of an umbrella.
Yeah.
Right.
And being able to realize that even within the invisible disability world, the chronic illness world, the chronic condition world, there's spectrums, and you yourself can live on different parts of the spectrum at different points in time. Like there's sometimes where you're like, yeah, it doesn't impact my life a whole lot. And the other times you're like, this is controlling every single thing of my life.
And I wrote a post. Sorry, what were you saying? Sorry.
No, you go ahead, Effie.
No, go. Finish up.
Okay. No, I honestly don't know what I was going to say.
Oh. You guys can edit this out. Sorry.
We're probably not going to edit any of this because it's pretty funny. Okay.
Shout out to our podcast editor, Olivia.
Yeah.
Who does
Have
a
fun
great
with
job.
this.
Yeah. Have fun with this one.
No, like you guys are just talking about identifying. Like I wrote a post for someone recently, and it was like I didn't really. I was talking about like I don't really know where I belong. Like if I belong in the invisible illness group, invisible disability, like I don't really, obviously I have a disabled parking placard, whatever, and I don't really label myself as a disabled person, but some people do identify strongly with that,
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's just like I fall into all these different groups. I don't really know where I belong. So I'm just like, yeah, I'm Effie, whatever, But,
Yeah.
So then how do
Yeah.
you feel about allowing yourself to define what groups that you want to identify with and which ones you don't resonate with you as much?
I don't know.
Mhm.
That's a good question. You got me stumped there. I guess it's just all personal. That's all I can really say. It's not really something I can be like telling people to label themselves as something because everyone's on their own journey. Like some people haven't maybe accepted that part of themselves yet,
Yeah.
and
I love that.
it takes some time, but I just don't necessarily see myself as just a disabled person just because I have a placard or,
Mhm.
mobility issues in some areas, and I don't know, it's weird. I just haven't really discovered that aspect of where I belong yet.
Yeah. And then, I mean, I guess that also brings up the whole topic, though, of like, why does one need to be labeled? Because there's those out there, for example, who they are absolutely 100% living with like chronic conditions of any kind under this umbrella that we're discussing, but they have no diagnosis.
Mhm.
And so it's like, for example, they shouldn't be any less heard, validated, believed just because they don't have the label of a diagnosis,
Mhm.
you know? And so they probably also feel like not totally sure where to belong. And I know that I felt that way for 2 years before I finally got my diagnosis, was like, something's wrong. And at first, I didn't even like, I don't know. I kept being like, I'm fine. Everything's fine. And my husband at the time was the one that was like, something's wrong with you. Like, I'm worried about you kind of thing. And I remember being like, screw you. I'm fine. It's you, not me. And then it was like over a little time, I started looking at my peers around me and my coworkers. And I'm like, okay, wait, actually though, they're able to do all of these things. And I'm not able to do those things, or, they feel fine with this, that, and the other. And I don't. And it was over like a 6 months to a year period of me just observing my peers and being like, yeah, I do feel differently. I am different. And then I didn't feel like I belonged and I didn't know what was wrong. And then I'm like, something's wrong with me. I'm sick. I think, I don't know, just everything hurts and I'm dying all the time. And then I did get a diagnosis, and, I definitely went through a period of time with the diagnosis of like, this isn't going to affect my life at all. I'm not sick. I am fine. I'm going to keep living life. This isn't going to hold me back. And which is a great attitude to have because we can have it all no matter what we have going on. That being said, I ended up putting this ridiculous pressure on myself and trying to hold myself to these standards of these like abled people. And only recently have I realized that that's kind of been detrimental. But anyway, that's my roundabout correlation of like, maybe we don't need labels all the time. Maybe you're not totally sure where you belong. And I guess if maybe you are one of those people who's not sure, just know that in our space here online, Chelsea and I definitely are the ones who are like, we believe you, you say how you feel, and you don't have to prove anything, because there's so many people out there who may not have that kind of support close to them with family and friends and may not feel heard. And we definitely want to offer a space for people to feel heard.
And I also, Effie, as you kind of thought about how to answer that last question, I loved how you're just like, I don't know, I'm Effie. Like you are just you.
Yeah.
And you don't have to label yourself. You don't have to put yourself in boxes. And I kind of like think that people in general, you can pick how much of like a box, like you don't have to, if you're like, I have an invisible disability, you don't have to like make that all of who you are. It can be like this tiny sliver, and you get to kind of decide what your personal box ends up being. It doesn't have sides. it can be whatever it wants to be. I'm doing a lot of hand gestures for everyone that can't see, and it's very big and very flowy. And I think that it's more important for people to define themselves in ways that feels good to them over what society thinks.
Well, yeah, because, oh my gosh, I was just talking to someone the other day who is one of the people who doesn't have a lot of support or belief around them for what they're experiencing, even though they've actually been living with this chronic condition for 20 plus years. Because because I guess she like kind of explained to her husband that she wanted to be a bit more expressive and represent those with invisible illness. She's kind of having like a big moment of where she kind of said like, I really just want to like scream to the world, hear us, So, and especially with her not being able to express herself, I think it's really coming out as like an urge. And so she shared it with her husband, and her husband said that he really didn't want her illness to be the focal point of their lives. But
it probably is. They just don't share it with everyone else.
Well, it can be, but I think it's important how Effie said, like, I'm just Effie. It's like, we're all living with these illnesses that it can sometimes be one of the focal points of life, but it doesn't define who we are as people. Like, we are still people, and we live with this. Right.
Yeah. And I also think like your family and your friends, they're also going on the journey. They're impacted just as much as you are. And sometimes they have to have some time to catch up, to like, be like, okay, well, my wife or my spouse or my girlfriend or boyfriend has this condition and it's impacting them. It's hard for them to accept that as well, I think. Because I've had like people tell me like, oh, like my boyfriend told me I'm not like disabled or something, when you have a disability, or like invisible disability, for instance. But sometimes they don't want to like acknowledge that either. They're like, oh no, like, because like sometimes people like want to be like positive, quote unquote, like be like, oh no, you don't have that, stop, but then you do. So then what are you going to do when people tell you that you don't have that, and to like, don't talk about it type thing? Because some people get silenced within their families or their friends because they don't want their illness to be talked about, like in certain cultures too. I know that's the case.
Yeah, that's true. There are certain cultures. Yeah, that is a good point. You have great perspective,
Effie. You're so smart and just so amazing.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So, you guys for creating this podcast.
Thank you for being really patient with clearly us and our brains today. Normally, if one of us is like a little off, the other one is usually on fire, and it really works out. But
apparently today we're both a little off.
Yeah, apparently our brains are like not tip top today. So thank you for being so patient. And I still feel like we had some really great info on this podcast.
Yes. And so, because you're so amazing, Effie, and I want all of our listeners to be able to connect with you and be able just to see the tools that you're giving people, like that video series. Seriously, if you haven't paused this podcast to go actually watch the video series.
You can listen to.
That's true. I mean, do both. Watch and listen. Do that now, unless you're driving. Please don't watch a video while you're driving.
Yes.
But otherwise, pause it, go watch the videos, come back. Where can people find you on the internet, Effie?
Yeah, you guys can find me on Instagram and Twitter. Okay, hold on. You guys can find me on Instagram and Twitter.
Now I don't feel so bad because it's Effie too.
No, I do stumble sometimes. I don't know why. It's weird. Okay, so you guys can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Rising Above RA, and also my blog, Rising Above Rheumatoid Arthritis, and my YouTube channel, RA and Myself.
And those will all be linked in the show notes for easy access. There's a lot of links in the show notes this week.
Yeah.
Yes.
Woo. Well, Effie, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to talk to us. This has been fantastic. Listeners, if you loved this conversation, take a screenshot of the episode, tag both of us on Instagram.
And join in.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right.
Woo.
Woohoo.
Yay.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Please write us a review to help us reach more people like you.
If you'd like to connect with Cassie and I, you can find us on Instagram at The Real Spoonies Unite. You can also join our private Facebook community, Spoonies Unite, or you can visit our website, therealspooniesunite.com, for all sorts of resources and to stay up to date with our current projects. And don't worry, you can find all of these links in the show notes below.
Thank you to our wonderful Spoonie patrons for all your support, and you can become one too. That's right. All you have to do is go on over to patreon.com/therealspoonies and you can get all sorts of extra goodies like videos of our episodes and more.
Any support is greatly appreciated. It helps enable us to create more content for all of you, as well as make this podcast sound better and better. Thanks for listening. We can't wait to be back in your ears soon.